Yeah, look, let's jump into it. Welcome back to the Everything Property Podcast. Today, we're up on the sunny Gold Coast and we're joined by ex-NRL player, buyer's agent, property investor, Matt Srama. Welcome to the Everything Property Podcast, mate. How are you?
Brother, good to be here. Welcome to the Gold Coast, baby.
Mate, apart from the bloody traffic to...
long weekend vibes, man.
I thought Sydney was bad. It's like, it was 2 hours, 2 and a bit hours to get down here from Brisbane. So I'm glad we finally
that population growth,
gentrification of the Goldie, you would know. But man, I'm keen to do this. We've obviously been trying to tee this up a while, especially when we were in prison the other day, trying to put this time together. So I appreciate you coming out. What I want to talk about today, I know you're sort of out there, you're in the buyer's agent space, but you're probably the first like professional athlete we've had on the podcast. So I appreciate you sort of coming on. I want to dig into a little bit of that because I feel like for some reason there's not a lot of professional players out there that want to talk about their story and the property building journey. And I feel like it's interesting because you're earning a lot of money, and obviously for you and your career, it's not a 30-year career for a lot of people.
Definitely.
And then what people do with that money, some people waste it, some people invest it. So, Matt, I want to sort of start at, like, you as playing rugby league. How did you get introduced to that game, and like, was it always wanting to play in the NRL, or how did you sort of start on from there?
Yeah, bro, it was pretty much from the age of 5. Always wanted to play footy. Like my dad played it, my brother played it. They both got close to playing professionally, and then I was sort of the youngest, so I was the last one. It was the last chance to go pro. And those ones, your dad really is living through. He really wants you to get there. And the good thing was, like, I loved it. I loved footy. It was my whole life. And, my dad was from Poland and my mum was from the Philippines. So they both come here with practically nothing. The old immigrant story. I grew up in Western Brisbane, had a great household. It was one of those families where I had everything I needed, but as life grew on, I realised, oh man, my parents didn't, they just got by. Like, mum was a hotel cleaner and dad was a garbage truck collector, the one at the back of it, and pick up the bins. Yeah, it's not until you get older you realise, oh man, they come here for opportunity, and it's funny, like, looking back, I had everything I needed as a kid. So it just shows, hey, like, just having present parents who support you and want you to succeed is kind of where it's at. Hey, like, I had all my brother's hand-me-downs and those sorts of things, and I seen all the kids at school have the Pokemon cards and that, and family didn't really buy me those things, but what they did do, they always come to my footy games, always came to my training and stuff like that. So that's something that's ingrained in me, is just having the support of parents, no matter income's large or small. I think that's a huge, I guess. I had a real head start in life on that, I feel, for sure.
What are some of the key lessons from either mum or dad, growing up as a kid? A lot of people work back and they see things their dad did or their mum did that like is ingrained in them. So, like, who taught you sort of what, now that you can look back and realise it?
Mate, it's so good to reflect on habits, where you are now in life. And it was probably like 3 years ago when I started getting when I retired, actually, I got really into like self-development, reflecting and those sorts of things. And mate, it's just funny. It mapped out literally how I got to the NRL, how I started getting into property and those sorts of things. So long story short, I'd say the 3 biggest ones, growing up with immigrant parents, they work hard. They just work, man. And you just work. Like, it's just, mum would just nonstop reflecting, cooking, cleaning, just making sure food was always on the table, just always doing something. And she worked at a hotel, so she'd work all day there, come home and just work. But then I went and visited her families over there, and they're all working. They're just working constantly. They just work hard. And then dad, that Eastern European, they're just very disciplined sort of people, so don't really show emotion. So what I got from him was kind of that discipline approach. So I do my training, I make sure I finish my training, and then, you make sure you get up tomorrow and train again, and you sort of get up. And then the third one, this is probably where the whole property ties in, is obviously coming from an immigrant family, there were savers. They didn't. Who's teaching them business and scaling and stuff? So any money is scarce. So I was a big saver in my like late teens, early 20s when I started earning finally money and started getting full-time contracts. Then I just used to save it. Wouldn't spend it because it was like I couldn't spend a thing. Like parents wouldn't buy me anything really growing up. It was a family where you switch all the lights off.
Yeah.
Fridge is open too long. Like, Matt, electricity bills. Quick. Yeah. So if you would ask me what I got from my parents, it's kind of that mentality, like scarce with money, which isn't a positive. I learned I had to kind of rewire my brain there. But the positives I did get was, work hard and discipline.
It's funny that, right? Because at the time you think it's the best thing to do because it's your parents and they obviously have the best intentions for you.
Yeah.
But then when you get a little bit older, a bit wiser, you think, and I know with a lot of people I talk to, like parents especially these days are stuck in one particular frame of mind.
Yes. Yeah.
And even like with my mum telling her about like even the podcast development sites and the money and the outlays and that.
Yeah.
It's a different gravy. They don't really understand it. So it's interesting to see that like the older you've looked back.
Yeah, and it's probably just on that. Anyone listening right now who might have a parent in their ear or things like that, you pretty much nailed it. Their intentions are the best. But to give you perspective, quick story, I didn't tell my parents I bought my first home for 18 months. 18 months. I kept it under wraps because the word debt is like for immigrant parent, they'd be just like, what? What are you doing? You got debt. So again, but I had to coach myself and understand. I listened to podcasts like this. I listened to YouTube. I watched it and read magazines. And what I understood was the successful people in property were doing these things that were against my parents' values. So did my parents have a portfolio? No. So would I take their advice? All these people I'm looking up to and studying. So sometimes, again, I know they had my best interest. But if you're someone listening right now, sometimes success leaves clues, hey?
Definitely. And I think it's that age-old saying of taking advice from people that have or are doing what you want to do or that don't have it. So it's like your parents obviously want what's good for you, but they also want what's good for you for kind of them.
Yes,
like exactly. I want you in that 9 to 5. I want you in that sort of stable career, safe.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to play that game. In terms of NRL, you're obviously playing that as a kid, but at what point, what age does that sort of become a little bit more than a hobby? And you're like, well, this is ramping up. NRL or first grade debuts and that kind of stuff. Yep. Where are you at and how does that sort of play out?
Yeah, probably the age of 16, it started like it was getting a bit real. Like I got my first scholarship, they called it, with the West Tigers down in Sydney, and they'd fly you down on school holidays, and I'd bunker up in Concord with a bunch of other 16-year-olds, and that was my first exposure, like the bright lights of Sydney and like traveling
Concord
and like,
Oval too,
and training, and mate, it was like, whoa, this is sick. And then we'd get to rub shoulders. I seen like Benji Marshall and stuff like that. I'm like, oh man, he's right there, So that was when I was like, I want to do this. I want to like this is gone. I want to go pro now. So 16, 17 were formidable years hard years because you've got your friends who are probably not going to go pro now, and they're doing different things, different stage of life, parties and having a good time, and, uni and gap years and stuff. So I remember those years very clearly as like a young boy and just being like, man, like, are my friends going to not? Because I was really disciplined. As I said, I got that from my dad. So that was the decision I made to go all in with footy. I used to sometimes turn away the house parties and things like that. I didn't go to schoolies. Again, if I would have went or not, would that have been the difference? Probably not. But it was just that kind of message to myself, like I want to give this a red hot crack. So to answer your question, probably like 16, 17, signed with the Titans at 18. On a part-time basis, so just chugging away doing a few different jobs, and then I'd leave Brisbane at 3:00 in the afternoon. I'd drive all the way down the Gold Coast, do some training, come
what's
home.
like a part-time I mean, I don't have any exposure. I know football quite well, but rugby league, I don't know part-time. Like, what do you get as like a salary or like breaking into the NRL? Are you allowed to say? Or
yeah, 100%.
It's been some time now, so
it's wild what they get now, man. But back in the
really?
It's
okay,
mate. Yeah, it's I forgot what you're on 6 figures from the get-go now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
From a minimum wage, but back then, so to give like a scholarship might have been 10 grand, right? So it's just you get an opportunity and some gear. So for me, it was like, look, I couldn't get really work after school because who would let you out at 2:30 every day? So I struggled with that, and then ended up finding I'm very grateful actually to this warehouse. It's still a pretty cool job, but they actually allowed me that opportunity, and I'm super thankful. There was this in Darra in Western Brizzy. I used to go there in the morning about 7:30. I'd be gone by 2:30, and that was like stacking boxes, you know, cleaning out containers, just hard labor.
Yeah.
Jump in the car, you know, eat a sandwich, drive to the coast, micro sleeping on the way down, get to the Gold Coast, train from like 4 till 6 or 6:30. You would do recovery. By the time you leave the Goldie at 7 o'clock, it's dark, and by the time I get home, Western Brisbane, it's nearly 8:30. Mum's again grateful living at home. Mum had the food ready, and you know, then that was my life for a good 2 years, and it was tough. That's the toughest part of going pro. It's like you're not pro, but you want to go pro.
Yeah,
but like and you're not getting paid anything either.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the tough point. Luckily, strung some good games together. You'd hear it all the time. You take your shots, right? There's so many instances through that journey. It might have been one game where I remember I had a starting. I was off the bench one of them, and the starting hooker was injured that week, and I just took it with both hands. Got man of the match. That got me noticed. And then, you know, later on in that year, end up on a full-time contract. You know, again, it was huge for me. It was like 60 grand. And then match bonuses of, you know, $1,000 a game if I ever got there.
Okay. That's if you played?
That's if you played, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
is that how it's structured in sort of NRL?
Yeah. So what happens is I was considered not. It's different now. I couldn't comment on now, but what it was then, it was like there's a top 25. So that's the salary cap.
Yep.
Top 25, that salary cap, whatever it is, all gets divvied out to the top 25. Then there's this other pool of like part-timers kind of thing. So they're like 50 grands and stuff like that. So I was sort of in that. So I'd still be working part-time whilst full-time training. So again, I held on to that job as long as I could. And yeah, and then I remember the time, that stage got me to the age of about 19. Full-time training as an athlete, so full-on NRL training now.
Yep.
Working part-time. Made my NRL debut at the age of 20. And then at the end of that year of being 20, I quit my job and moved down to the Gold Coast.
Do you remember the day?
Oh, bro. It was good, man. It was just like a feeling. It was weird because I held on to the job for some reason. Just like I felt bad. I don't know. I have no idea why, but I just remember like, I should just go all in with the footy now. So it was about in late. What would that been? I made my debut like 2011 kind of thing. So late 2011 would have been, yeah. And then I just decided left the warehouse and give this footy thing a crack full time. And as I said, I was really, really fortunate. First 2 years, nearly played every game as a starting hooker.
Yeah.
The top 3 hookers were injured or out. So I was the 4th string. And yeah, first game, I ended up winning man of the match. And then I just held that spot for 2 years, got my matchies, and I just saved it all. I just saved all my little matchies.
Because when does property come in? Was your first property 25?
Yeah, 23. 23, yeah.
Yep.
So you can imagine there's probably 2 solid years there. Again, looking at figure, you probably, again, 60 grand plus 24 games in the year. It's probably another 20. So probably like 80 grand.
80 grand, and you're playing NRL on TV.
Yeah. And this is what people don't realise. Like, if you're not there's the top percent of
course.
players.
Yeah. The big
But
dogs.
there's a lot of battlers. There's heaps of battlers, man. And the hard thing that people don't realize is with the battlers, all of them are on 1 year contracts. So you move your whole family for 80 grand, 90 grand potentially, you know, not even to guarantee a spot. You get cut or injured and you've got no guarantee of income the following year, and you've got to go to England. And yeah, there's this whole tier of players that they're just bouncing around, just scraping by. So, but yeah, the payout is if you have a good season though, you could get a lucrative contract, right?
Oh.
So that's kind of how the journey started, and yeah, had a few injuries as the journey progressed, and unfortunately had to retire at the age of 26, I think it was, which was well before what I expected.
So medically retired, injuries, your shoulder, your hip, your finger, those types of things.
Yeah, a bit of everything. Yeah.
But I think that probably the hardest part, right? What would you say actually before we get into that? What was your highlight of that whole first grade career?
Yeah, pretty much the first grade debut. I'd say
the first game.
Yeah, it was magical experience, like running out in front of Suncorp Stadium, which is in Brisbane, which was my hometown. And you just get this little reflection of like every coach, every player you played alongside, all the times you know, I jumped in with parents, like cars because needed a lift to training, and mum and dad being at the footy carnivals on school holidays. You know, you just get this bomb of far out.
You're running on there and just thinking, like, this is it. This happened.
This happened in front of a huge crowd, and that would definitely be the experience. Because it's like they say a lot of things in life, it's not the destination, it's the journey. Because the next week, I obviously want to play NRL again. It doesn't stop there. You just want to keep playing. But the journey there was the thing that meant the most to me.
And framed you up who you are today. Yeah. So tell me about the journey to the first property. Who's advising you at that time, at that age? I'm sure you would have had teammates that are, you know, buying all sorts of crazy shit. The boys on a little bit more money.
Yep.
You know, where do you get your sort of your common sense from to chuck it all in a property at that age? You think you're going to live forever?
Yes.
And play till you're 35?
Yeah. Mate, it's a really good question. This is why I'm so big on surrounding yourself with the right environment. And again, I believe in like having digital mentors too. Like people probably watch your podcast and they see you as a mentor, right? And I wholeheartedly believe you have to feed your mind what you need it. So to give you an example, I remember locker room. Again, you're a young 20-year-old. I was really fortunate. The Titans had quite an old team. So guys like, you know, late 20s, early 30s, they already got kids and stuff like that, a few properties under their belt. Yeah. And I remember two guys in particular that used to kind of sit near me, and they'd just talk about shares and property and different things. And I asked one of them one day, and he gave me a card of just a broker. And I didn't even know what a broker was. And that's honestly kind of where it sort of started, of like, okay, so a broker gets you a loan and you buy a house. So at the point of 23, you know, had some cash savings, and then that's how I want to buy a property and put in a property. So to be honest, the surroundings of older people definitely help. And then YouTube and podcasts, magazines, all that stuff too.
Who are the players? Can you give them a shout out?
Yeah, Ash Harrison was definitely one. So, and funny story, post-career now, he's a financial planner, you know. So
who would have thought?
It's funny, I know. So it's just funny, like he was a guy, I remember he was saying he had like 3 properties or so, 4 and had a few in Brizzy. I was like, fuck, that's sick, hey? Like, how did you do that? Like, you know, so that was cool. And then I really appreciated, obviously, these older guys helping someone young like me. You know, and then honestly, one of my biggest influences as well, funny looking back, I remember walking into a bank and just saying I want to buy a property, and I went to the old Suncorp because that was the family bank, you know, where mum and dad paid the bills and stuff. So you just walk into the bank, and I said I want to buy a home, and then you get the in-house lender. But got to give it to him, like he really just held my hand. Like I would have been such a punish asking all these questions. He was great. His name is Chris, and he helped a lot. And my first loan was actually through a bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so you actually got the loan, no serviceability issues or anything like that?
Well, again, because I had a contract, I had good savings.
Mm-hmm.
My rent was next to nothing. I didn't really, again, from my frugal upbringing, like my expenses were fine. Like,
how do you find the suburb for the first property? What are you doing for research? Because these days, we have this podcast. We have a lot of other podcasts, and there's gurus on social media that'll chuck up areas and that kind of stuff. But back in those days, there wasn't all that noise.
Yeah. Well,
so what's your?
Mine's an interesting story. My first property is still my owner occupier.
You still live there?
Yep, still live there to this day. So I was in the suburb of Palm Beach on the Gold Coast.
Yep.
And again, I'd love to say I was a genius, but it was purely based on my needs and wants out of lifestyle. And, my biggest tip I can give to anyone listening to this was I'm so glad upon reflection, I was looking at 3 types of properties, right? I remember, I just wanted to be kind of close to training, close to the beach, all those. I remember looking at townhouses, like one of 50, shiny. They look cool.
Yeah.
Really, really nice. Things like that. I remember I missed out on 2 of those, right?
Thank God.
Yeah, well, this is probably a big lesson for anyone who might be in this zone right now. The second was like, high-rise sort of units. I checked them out too. Body corporate, I was a bit like, what? And then I ended up getting just this kind of like standalone duplex, no body corporate. The reason I got it is literally across the road from the beach. I'm like 80 meters from the sand.
Wow.
And it was a little bit more, but I was like, I don't know. I love the location of it. Anyways, got that one. Amazing, whatever.
What are we talking purchase price back then?
600.
Okay.
600K. Yeah, 600K.
Opposite Palm Beach, on beachfront.
Yeah. So it's probably worth about 1.8, 1.9 now. I'd say 1.8. But the lesson is the different 600K, the unit and townhouse are about 550, 500.
Yeah.
My one's now probably in the mid to high ones, as mentioned. Those other 2 are probably just cracking $1 million. Like if that valuation today.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you've got that.
So it's just showing the asset. Yes, the locations were the same, but the asset types and the dwellings were different. And then that's why that first one, to answer your question, again, I'd love to say I chose that. It was purely based on what I wanted. But the key lesson, I guess, is I always look at things now moving forward. Like there's got to be a touch of owner-occupier appeal. I think if you're just focusing on investor-driven areas, that's where all the other investors are. And I've always really like those built. Where do the owner-occupiers live? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones pushing the valuations up, I feel.
Yeah, starting that growth cycle.
Yeah, starting the growth cycle.
What's your investing philosophy? Because one lesson that one thing I always try to say on this podcast with everyone that listens to it is that, and I mentioned it in one last week, a few weeks ago, is that like I always interview people. Everyone's got sort of a different story with how they've been able to build wealth, build their property portfolio. The issue that people run into, though, is that they hear those stories and then try to take everything and do it that way. I always say try to take some learnings from every story that suits your current situation, because not everyone's going to be on NRL contracts and try to do it from there. So, like, what is, if you had to summarize what your sort of investing philosophy is? You have people blue chip and apartments, or like what's Matty Srama's investment philosophy? 2025.
It's a good question, and again, knowing what I know now, it's probably that. Firstly, the investing strategy I feel changes as the season goes on. So right now, as I was saying off air before, like I'm in a buy zone now. Like I got equity redraw from a broker. My buying criteria is way different to my early 20s, right?
Of course.
But I feel as though my advice would still somewhat be the same for anyone trying to build an asset base. So if we take into account starting, like growth phase, my philosophy was always simply like a buy and hold strategy. So I would I would never buy anything brand new, or would never
touch. Plan?
Yeah, definitely not touch off the plan. But I would always look. One of my early mentors, my accountant, actually told me, just try and find a little bit of X factor about it too, like a little bit of X factor about it. So not just is it a corner block? Is it medium density? Has it got a view corridor? Something like that, like just some sort of X factor. So I'd always look at something with a little bit of X factor. It's the word manufacture equity. How many pillars or how many levers of equity drivers can I pull? So one, for example, is cosmetic renovation. So ideally I could pull on that later, so I don't look at things brand new, because I want to be able to pull on the equity lever of doing a renovation at some point. Number two would be buying in areas that are somewhat in capital cities to start with, for example. So, and I've got some regional properties too, but I think when I say capital city, I'm not talking blue chip. I'm just talking not in the middle of nowhere. I also use the term like metropolitan cities as well. Like Gold Coast is even considered a regional city. So strong regional city or
hubs,
capital hubs. Yeah. Not in the middle of nowhere. And then I'm just playing the longer. I wouldn't look at like flipping the thing in like 12 months, 18 months. I just kind of put a tenant in there and then just let it do its thing. I just think it's a long game approach as you're starting. You're not going to get a stack of equity straight away, but if you have some of those equity levers, you can just boost it up a bit more and speed things up.
It's interesting, a buyer's agent that's not telling you to sell every couple of years and try to fleece the property with the equity and buy again, because I feel like entry and exit costs, a lot of people don't consider that. So it just shows me where your thinking is, and also where your sort of business is at with what you're suggesting with your clients. So it's interesting to hear. So first property under the belt. Do you get the second one before you have to retire?
Yeah. So this is the thing too. If I had my time over again, I would have leveraged way harder when I was actually playing footy. Yeah. And to give perspective, I was considered in the, I got through the battler stage, but I definitely wasn't superstar stage at all, right? And even I tell people now, like my highest ever salary for 1 year was like 160. Was like the highest I ever got to. Yeah, it was like a 2-year contract, right?
Pretty decent.
Yeah, at 20, mid 20s, which is good for the everyday 20, for sure. So, but could I have serviced that? Could I have gone to the bank with that?
Yeah,
100%. So I actually only got one really when I was playing, and that's probably my biggest, knowing what I know now, is we've worked with a stack of footy players, and like I love helping the other footy players. It's just like you have an opportunity where you're potentially getting more income than the average 20-year-old, 21-year-old. You're young, you got nothing to lose either, and sometimes the contracts are like fixed, they're like 4 years, and like the banks would love that, right? So make the most of it. But yeah, going back to the second one was essentially just using just cash. I used cash deposit for the second one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still living at home, or you're renting?
I'm renting now.
Yep.
And then
what are we talking sort of numbers wise?
Yep. So what happened was I had the owner rock, and then I started understanding. So actually, here's a sliding doors moment that I've said before, but I was coming eventually to the back end of my career, had a few injuries and whatnot. I'm in the waiting room.
Back end of your career, your mid-20s.
Yeah, I know, crazy. And then I was in the Burley Q scan and getting a scan on my knee, and so many injuries, man. And I was at that point, and for whatever reason, I didn't have my phone on me, and I just picked up a magazine that was on the thing, and it was called Australian Property Investor, or API. Yeah. And I picked it up, and I just started reading it, and I was like, this is sick. Like, people are buying houses like not to live in. Like, they rent it out and they get income from it. Yeah. And I started looking at the back, and they had all these percentage growth things, and right at the back.
I remember those ones.
Yeah. And I still to this day, it's a funny story. It had property SQ, and I was like, oh man, I really want it. And I took it home with me, the magazine. And then I went to the news agency and just bought a stack of these magazines. And then every few months I'd buy an API mag.
Yeah.
And that's where I went. That started the trigger of property investment, like buying property to not live in. That opened a can of worms. I started going podcasts, all the seminars you could think of. the I Love Real Estates, the Dibford, but
she's still going.
Yeah, still going. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I never bought anything, but I just would always take my notepad. I just learn, man. I'd be in the big learning stage. So that's how that opened up the second one then. And I took, it was the scariest one still to this day. It was like, I'm buying a property that I'm not going to live in. That's why it felt really scary.
Yeah. But wait, you didn't tell your parents about the first one, the owner?
No, I didn't tell them about that one. I finally did. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm on now. Like, and I just started, just went down the rabbit hole.
What are the next couple of purchases look like in terms of pricing and, you start with equity or you're just chucking your salary behind that? Like how are you, because you get into the back end of it, which we'll touch on, obviously the unit blocks becomes a bit more exciting, but those next couple to get you through sort of 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
What are they? Where are they? What price ranges you're buying at?
Yeah, this is an exciting journey because the ceiling comes, right? But how it all worked was essentially coming to the end of my career, I snuck in one more before I finished. And what I did was, again, first time investor, you invest in your backyard, right? That's probably so. I invested in a unit, but I took the fundamentals and what the learnings I had. So I found this corner block in the suburb of Palm Beach where I was already living. Right, it was in Palm Beach, so I couldn't even fathom buying interstate or anything. I was just like backyard invest. I took the fundamentals though, and I was researching and looking for a while, putting offers in, and I was getting more confident. And I come across this, it was a corner block, it was an 880 square metre corner block, brick walk up, so no amenities on it. It had views of the ocean from the balconies, and it was just a solid block, like a corner block, and there was only 8 in the building. And that, I missed out on one that was online for 310K, and 320K. Missed out on is online. I was the underbidder, and the owner contacted the old lady downstairs, and she hit me up direct, and we nutted out an
deal
off market.
You didn't even know what the term was.
I had no idea. And me and this old lady come to agreement at 305K. 305K is my first investment property, and it's 2-bed, 1-bath. Body corp was probably like $30 a week. Like your proper brick and tile.
Easy.
Like, nice little. The balcony had little views of the ocean, and it rented out straight away at probably like 5.5%, 6%, gross. So that was my first investment property, and I've still got it to this day. And that one's just been amazing because obviously the Gold Coast has gone through this gentrification. The density is obviously great. So had a few approaches from developers already. I was going to say,
when's that start? Because sometimes they'll come in and...
Exactly, yeah. So some of us said yes, some of us said no. I'm keen to just hold it for a bit more, ideally. But so that was kind of that first one. And then I started, again, going down the rabbit hole, and then I really wanted houses. I felt the values in the land. And then this is where I started getting really good people in my corner. I felt a really good accountant and a really good broker. And I was all in with the whole property investing thing. I want to give this a crack. By this time, no salary anymore. I've gone back to 55 grand.
Yep.
Big drop. Back down to reality.
Yeah, well, how was that? Because transition out from a guy that's on TV every week.
Yeah.
You got people that have a jersey with your number on the back that are calling out for you, center of attention. You see yourself on, the news and stuff like that. To retiring at quite a young age, I would say that that's quite a difficult transition.
Yeah. Probably the hardest 12 to 24 months of my life still to this day. Because the hardest thing athletes struggle with now that I've got hindsight up my sleeve is identity. Your identity is wrapped of being an athlete. And the biggest advice I give to all athletes now is like, being a professional athlete is what you do. It's not who you are. And it's easier said than done because it's your life. You're in this bubble. you see your name in the paper. It's just constant. Everyone asks you at barbecues, oh, how's the week? How'd you go on the game? Mate, that pass you did, what about that? You know, it's just all consuming. And then once it's gone, it's like this massive valve of pressure release finally off your shoulders. But then you start to understand you're back in the real world now. And what happens is, because a lot of your friends are similar ages, but they're already up the corporate ladder, they've started their businesses, whatever, they've finished uni, you're starting from scratch and your resume is empty and no one cares who you are anymore. Wow. You know, so it's a very tough transition. What do you do? Like,
yeah, literally.
What do you actually do? You've spent so much focus and time doing one thing for so long that once it's gone, it's like, well, what's next? So that was a really tough time where I just sort of bounced around. I tried a lot of things. And if it wasn't for my little investment property spitting out some cash flow, and on the DL, I had some rooms rented on my owner occ too for cash. No one knows around that, but but all I was thinking was, like, I was always thinking, how can I inject cash flow into my life? Like, I'm happy to rent out some bedrooms and different things to help with cash flow. I didn't care at all. My investment property was doing the thing. That cash flow actually helped me in the transition because I could try things by choice, not by need. So yeah, bounced around doing coaching, doing this, doing that. And it took me a good sort of, as I said, 1 to 2 years, and finally arrived at some basic income as a real estate sales agent.
Yeah, McGrath, right?
Yeah, McGrath. Yeah. And I was like, sweet. I always had the property investment thing. I was like, let's give this sales thing a go.
The name, it makes sense.
Give it a crack. And yeah, it was good first year as a sales agent. And it allowed me during that period of time, I started building up the cash base again. It wasn't for me, the real estate sales side. I just didn't enjoy it. So I left it straight away. Again, it was really good because I had the rent from the investment property that I could kind of bounce around again. So I just bounced doing different things. And then I started working at a property kind of consultancy firm and whatnot. And that's where it started to really go hard with property, because that company had some software and there was an in-house broker. So I started really learning around like finance and areas and different things like that.
You got hooked.
Yeah, I did. And then obviously having my accountant and broker. So post probably 2 years post career, I then bought in Deception Bay was the next one. Bought a 3-bed, 1-bath on about a 550 square block, right in that zone where it's prime for redevelopment. I was learning a lot now on like zoning and stuff. Picked that up for, I think it might have been in 2s, to be honest, like 297, something like that. That area was really good cash flow. I was renting at like 350s.
What's it worth now?
The Deception Bay is probably 650s, I'd say. Yep. 650, close to 7. And yeah, the rent's just done its thing. Really good block there. Went straight from that straight into, and this is probably a lesson too. I realized once I could get borrowing, I was on.
Yeah, okay.
I wasn't procrastinating anymore.
Yeah.
Because I realized the most expensive thing investors are doing right now is not doing nothing. It's time out of the market that's costing them.
It's the people that are just waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting for rates to drop.
Exactly.
Waiting for the crash.
Waiting. The most expensive thing you're doing right now as a property investor is spending time out of the market if you've got capacity to borrow. And that's my big mindset shift, is like I kept going back to the bank. Sweet to go. Bang, I'd get the borrowing and then I'd go. So yeah, went from Deception Bay, started looking at all the forums and the hotspots and things like that. And I loved Brisbane. I thought Brisbane was really good. And obviously that Logan ring growing up in Western Brisbane, I've kept an eye on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think is all your portfolio in Queensland?
It is, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
fuck.
it is.
Interesting.
There's a little bit of, at the start it was like, I didn't, but then the last few have been by a bit more choice and entity structure. And just from where, it was kind of funny, by the time I was learning more, it was like, this is Southeast Queensland's on here. Like, man, just because some of those early ones were pumping, and I was like,
Who's is Michael your broker at this point?
Michael Shah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously getting some influence there too, and seeing what they're buying. And Logan was always on my mind. So I went hard in Logan and got 2 back-to-back in there.
Yeah.
Both of them were around, again, similar, like $350, renting, $450, one of them. And then the next one, I think might have been property 4, was then a 4-bed, 1 bath. I really liked it. It's placed at the front corner, 800 squares.
This is the
potential to granny flat, all that. So I started getting a lot more
clued
selected
on
with my property acquisition choices as well, and also started getting really good at negotiation too, and learning the game. And one piece of advice I give to everyone is don't underestimate the value of building equity through negotiation.
Oh, yeah.
If you make your money on the way in.
This is true.
Yeah, and one thing I identified with some of my best purchases, it was just because I was able to articulate what the seller needed and wanted, and met them on not on price but on terms.
Yeah, you've got to create that win-win, right?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, there's a lot of, we could talk for days on the negotiation side, but I think don't underestimate the power of being able to create a good win-win situation.
Win-win situation, and I think negotiation done well. Like we've got Scotty Agate. He's literally a property negotiator now. He's done 4,000 deals. He teaches the negotiation section that we've got in our course, and even I recorded that with him, and even watching it back, there were things where I just went like, I can't believe that, like, just the value and the, like, I mean, you only need to pick up something 10, 20 grand, like all the points and all the what to say, what to text, what to email, questions to ask, what not to ask, what not to say. It's an absolute minefield. And I think if you get the negotiation down right, down pat, like something like that, just that skill set in itself is huge. Are you still buying in personal name at this stage?
Good question. So again, getting more clued on onto again, if I could give one overarching piece of advice, it's the who, not the how. And it's one of my key philosophies in business too, is like, I don't expect to get to where I need to be through figuring out how. I need to find good who's to make sure they sit in their seat and they can help me get there. Why would I try and figure it all out myself? Just put a good who in place, ask them what to do, and get them to do it, and then just lean off them. I just think it's around who, not how. So as I said, I reached out, my broker, my accountant, I heard them on they were like at property levels that I didn't even think was possible. So I was like, why would I not just engage? I didn't care what the cost was. It's a who, not how problem. So what I started learning then, my accountant started teaching me on tax and land tax and entities and structures. So we made a game plan of exhausting personal name first. So we got to probably 4, and then the next few were entity structures, because just again, from where I seen the opportunities, they were all in Queensland. We started doing trust for trust. So we weren't bottling too many in one trust, from that land tax point of view. Just getting a lot more strategic. Would I have figured that out myself? No way. Like, I need someone to tell me what the game plan is. So I gave my goals and I got the game plan, and we execute together. It's a who, not how problem.
And then sort of property 4, 5, when does it come into you starting, like, going out on your own? What's that decision there to do the Srama
Great question. Yeah, this is the fun part. So property, probably 4 or 5, get to the ceiling. The dreaded ceiling everyone gets to. And my earlier properties now that we've had a few years up our belt, Southeast Queensland, Goldie and Brizzy are pumping. I've got a war chest of equity, and going back to the broker, doing what I was doing before, like ready to go, bang. He said, brother, we're struggling. We're nearly capped, because a lot of those loans, because remember there was that period I was on them, like 50, 60 grand. So that's the thing too. I created a lot of those middle properties on 50, 60K salary, like next to nothing. It was just we got creative lending in place. So I started going to your third tier lenders. Yes, high interest rates, but I seen it as opportunity cost to get into the market. Hindsight's a funny thing, right?
Thank you very much.
Far out.
A lot of people freak out if I told them today I can get you the property, but it's an 8% interest rate.
Yeah.
They'd freak out, but you and me would be like, done.
Yeah, if it's getting me in the market, I know it's a good, you know what I mean? And that's again what learning does. It's you get confidence because you're learning off other people. You're hearing, well, if Dave says that's sweet, and like Matt's saying that's sweet, and they've got you know what I mean? We're on a property podcast. It's, well, at least look into it, at least explore it. Everyone's got different risk appetites at the end of the day, but yeah, so we went down the third tier lender. So a lot of my properties, my first few were with like St. George, and then I had a few like First Max and stuff like that. Great for getting things OLR, but you know.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. And then, so yeah, hit a ceiling.
Yep.
I said, I remember the combo, and I say this to everyone. I said to my broker, what do I need to do? He said, really, there's only two options. You either need to earn more income or you find a wife who's very wealthy, you know, and it's just, you know, and I tell a lot of people that when they get this really, all you got to do is just find a rich woman, man. That's all you got to do, or earn more income.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I was like, all right, earn more income. Okay. What I started understanding was, I read this book called The Cash Flow Quadrant. So Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, great book as well. But the cash flow quadrant has stuck with me for the test of time. And what it essentially is, there's the left side and the right side. Left side, employee and self-employed. The right side is business owner and investor. And I was stuck in the top left corner as employee.
Yep.
Unless my salary is going to quadruple, I'm probably going to be stuck for a bit.
Yep.
Okay. So I was like, all right, let's go down the self-employed route. And what I identified was a lot of the investors I looked up to all had their own businesses. And I seen a bit of a theme starting to arise that it seems like the harder you work, potentially you could open up a whole new borrowing capacity limit. So that's in smack bang in COVID. I was working again as a kind of part-time footy coach, earning next to nothing, like 40-something grand. And COVID hits, and I was on JobKeeper. I think it was like $700.
So what did you lose your job working at that property consultancy?
Yes.
Or?
So sorry, that was the one thing I mentioned. The property consultancy business. Again, it was like a 9-to-5 sort of vibe. And I don't know, I couldn't sit still.
I was going to say, I didn't get that energy from you.
It just was not for me, man. I love the property side, and I took away so many learnings, but I had to get out again. So the only job I could sort of pick up was just sort of footy stuff because I just needed a bit of a reset in life, I think, just to figure out what was next. And I just went back to coaching, doing part-time. COVID hits, sport is pretty much gone.
Yeah.
So I was like, hectic, like everything shut down.
Yeah.
And then that's where I was like, all right, it's nearly like sometimes in life we have cliffs there that we know we need to jump, but we procrastinate. And my biggest...
Got to rip the Band-Aid off, man.
Sometimes you don't know what's around the corner if you jump. And COVID for me was the forced jump. I had really no options. So I now had time to build a business. So out of my bedroom, I built the Srama Group Buyers Agency in my bedroom during COVID, and we launched in September 2020. And I just went for it and went back to my old job and said, I'm out. I had no clients. I knew I could do it. And the rest that's kind of how it started, the business side. So capped out a property for the next 2 years, but that's how the business started.
And what are your key takeaways, or, you've been growing that for 5 years now. There's going to be people like NRL guys, there's going to be sports people that listen to this. Potentially they're at that sort of stage where they're coming off a career, or they're coming out of like a job that they don't really like. what would you say is your main sort of key takeaways or key things to do when you're starting your own gig? Because it's hard. It's maybe not for everyone, but obviously now you've got the hindsight of 5 years worth of growth. So if I told you now you'd have to start again, what would be those first things now that you go back to and do straight away?
Yep. I think number one, if you're a property investor, I'm assuming a lot of property investors, number one would be accept that there's periods of time in your business career and your property investing career, because both are businesses, right? Sometimes you're going to have to put emphasis and focus on one rather than the other. So if I had my time over back, I used to get frustrated because I wasn't allowed to borrow because I didn't have any, I'd had that like frustration of like, I really want to be a property investor. But the broker keeps telling, nah, man, you're not in business long enough. If I could go back in time, I would look at both as entities and I would say, all right, for the next 12 to 24 months, I'm going to solely focus on building this business. So if I can come to a place in, 1 to 2 years, that's going to allow me to borrow even harder over here and just accept that I'm tapped out for a bit and just accept that.
Yep.
I think that's number one. And then number two is to grow the business. At the end of the day, people needing your service or product, that's your oxygen at the end of the day. So we can spend a lot of time doing this, doing that. But at the end of the day, I think early days of starting the business, you just need to make people aware of kind of like what you do.
Who you are,
who you are. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and make it happen. And the coolest thing around, if there's anyone listening who's a property investor about to go into a business or just start a business, use that as fuel to your fire. Use your borrowing capacity and what that's bringing you and your family and your personal goals. Use that as reasons to grow the business. Have some goal and clarity now. And like, if I get to X amount of top line revenue with a net profit of that, my brokers told me I could open up X amount of borrowing capacity. Like, how exciting,
Yeah,
so
true.
you're going into business now. It's tough, but you've kind of got that a bit of vision now and hunger to make it work for your property investment journey.
Like really, really break it down to if X is Y, then I get Z kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now I'm in the point of I chat to my broker. So again, I would be under the fact of, if you've started a business or whatever and you want to do the property investment thing, firstly, why? I always ask, like, why in the first place? Like, that's number one. Number two is, once you understand why, what do you need to achieve that why? So it could be a passive income of X, right? Have a chat to your broker at that point. Just say, what does it look like for me to have a passive income of X? Like, how much property would I need to accumulate to achieve that, for example? He may give you rough figures.
Yep.
If your income's not there, then ask, what sort of income level or net profit level would I be able to service that? Bang, straight away, there's your net profit goal.
Yeah.
That will just give you a bit more intention, I think, as a business owner to go hard and make decisions off that, if that makes sense.
This is true. It's a good way of looking at it, I think. It gives you you have the number, there's no fluff about it, and it's objective. This is what you need to hit, that net revenue goal. You get really interesting in your portfolio. You start to get into unit blocks, which was different to obviously your current strategy and what you'd own. So why the sort of transition in there, and then lending structures, how does that sort of come into it? Because obviously I feel like with buyers agencies and mortgage broking, it's like that first 2 years is a bit of a grind, but maybe then you get some momentum up, you get some profit in, P&L's looking good, you've got some cash. Tell me the story sort of with the unit blocks and those sort of next couple of deals.
Yeah, great question. That there was a property in between that when I was starting the business that I remember a client pulled out on a property, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And it was an absolute banger in the suburb of Mermaid Waters, and I just seen it as huge opportunity. Anyways, long story short, we secured it for $1,050,000. It had 25, and this is a good lesson actually. There was a property, ticked all the fundamental boxes, worst house, best street, all that sort of stuff. What I learned early on is there's money can't solve problems and there's money can solve problems.
I know where that learning's from. Yeah.
And money can't solve problems, things like, flood zones, potentially, busy roads, things like that. Don't worry about that. Money can solve problems, things like, water leaks, termites even. You can solve it. Like, what I'm trying to say is people get really scared and they nearly talk themselves out of amazing opportunities because of money can solve problems when a building and pest comes through. So there was this property we presented to a client. I said, mate, we're getting this so under market value. It was hoarded. It was terrible. Building and pest was fine. It had bad ensuite bathroom, like, leaks and things like that. I got a quote for it. It was about 22 grand. Anyways, scared someone else. Again, we never force anyone to buy. So I said, sweet. I said, I've got to buy this. So I just bought it, come up with some creative lending because I was about 1.5 years into the business. So not quite 2.
Yeah.
Don't know how we got it done somehow. Again, that's what a good broker's for.
Yeah.
And,
don't know.
And we got
don't
it
ask
done.
Any questions? Yeah.
We got it done. And that property, we bought it for $1.50. It valued after the 90-day settlement at 1.39 on the actual bank valuation on the little thing. So that just blew my mind. I'm like, man, people sometimes talk themselves out of opportunities based on just that little bit of fear straight away, right? Like always looking at net position. So when that one got secured, I was more looking then, all right, I've got some a lot of growth assets. That one was yielding very low. It was only at like 4%. That was my first experience of having a negatively geared, like solid negatively geared property. But you just made X amount on the capital growth side, right? So then, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I started learning was the term of like pigeon pairing. People always talk around that, like maybe some growth properties, maybe some cash flow properties, kind of all balancing in between. So I had a lot of really good assets in like those locations that were growing, in parts of Southeast Queensland and Brisbane, Gold Coast. So I started looking regionally then for cash flow. So that hence why I started looking at like unit blocks. And why I liked unit blocks was I identified that the value has always been in the land. Value's always been in the land. If I can kind of leverage the land with more streams of income on that one piece of land, that's only a benefit. I felt. So the fundamentals didn't change. It was just more of a riskier play. I was okay with potentially receiving slower growth for higher cash flow. So the next few took me to regional Queensland in Rockhampton. Okay. So got a block of 4 and a block of 5 within probably 6-ish months of each other. And they were both at kind of like 10-ish% gross, but on a net yield probably like 8-ish.
Is that because you put in 10% yield on literally rent and what you're buying it for?
Yeah.
Off the bat.
So purchase price was 7 on the first one, 650 and 750 were kind of the two, the 4-pack and the 5-pack. Renting, both of them were in the, one was at 1100, I think. 11 and 1, they're both in the thousands pretty much, like solid in the thousands. And whether that was good or not, it was my first time going more into the cash flow sort of assets. So for me, I was okay with that. And I wanted to boost up the cash flow injection.
Boost up cash flow, P2 LTD purchases then?
Yes. So new trusts, different trusts as well. And this is probably a big one too. Obviously this is commercial lending now. So again, you generally, some say 3, 4, whatever. Anything over 4 really is a commercial lend. Obviously chat to your broker, but so I'm going to need a higher deposit, generally speaking. So that's why I grabbed some of the equity, was able to facilitate a higher deposit. Commercial lend, yes, higher interest rate. But again, my goal there was more on the cash flow side.
Yeah, okay. So you come in heavy with the deposit and then you've sort of calculated that they'll come in. Yeah, well, especially that, like the yields were so strong based on the big deposit too. So I was, and that's what I mean. I sort of looked at the portfolio as like,
this is the point now where I've got even a bit more strategy now. I'm just thinking that helped from a servicing side. That's what I really wanted out of it, more of a servicing sort of play, because all the equity was there, and that was sort of drying up as we said before with the creative lending and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
So as the business has been growing now, it's kind of been back and forth. Hey, can I pull equity out? It's the back and forth play now.
Yeah, I can imagine it with the broker.
Yeah.
In terms of structuring and planning them out, the unit blocks obviously separate sort of probably discretionary unit trust structures.
Yeah.
What about the houses? Are you still layering them separately, or are you bundling a few of them together?
Yeah. So what the strategy could look like now moving forward is potentially bundling things in together, putting them in. Most are wiping themselves clean. So the debt, again, stuff I'm learning on the go, right? Like how amazing is that? Like from what I understand is if the debt's in a trust, like if it's positively geared, generally banks won't look at the debt component of the trust, right?
Yep.
So just little things like that where it's like, oh, that makes sense to kind of leave that one as is for now, So again, why it's so important having good accounts and good broker, because they're just kind of high level teaching me these things as we sort of go. So I always lean on them when the strategy moving forward now they've got the equity pool is like, I'll start looking at different areas and then I'll hit up my accountant quickly if I find something, and then he'll give me some advice on setting up a new one, putting it into existing based on where we're sort of at.
Yeah, right. And you said after them two, I think there was a granny flat play?
Yes. So, yeah. And then, so what's been happening the past, actually, here's a really good piece of advice for any business owners. And this is, again, a hindsight learning. I don't call them mistakes, I call them learnings. There was a point in the business, probably we're about 4.5 years, 5 years now. There was a point in the business around 2 years ago where I consciously made the decision to scale the business in terms of I didn't want the business just to be me. I wanted to build a team now to try and win back some time and do more leadership. With that comes obviously costs. I had to buy a space, had to fit it out, had to, hire more CRM software for all the new people I'm hiring. It's just like there's obviously overheads. If I had my time over again, I would have pulled the equity out before the end of financial year and then reinvested into the business. So the big key lesson now that I've learned moving forward is there's seasons when, again, you're investing into the business, and there's times when you want to make the P&L look juicy for your personal property portfolio. So moving forward now, the last 2 years, I've been solely focused on bumping up the net profit from the basis of I'm using that I want to build the business, but I essentially want the P&L to be strong so I can then go and deploy and grab everything back out, go again. Once that happens, which has just happened now, from end of financial year this year, I'm going to reinvest back into the business. I feel way more comfortable now putting a lot of expenses back into the business to try and grow it.
Okay.
Because sometimes, you're going to reinvest into the business. That business, it can take, 1 to 2 years before you it's not a quick bang, bang. It takes time, right? So that's a huge lesson I learned and mistake, because it tapped me out for probably a good 18 months again.
And then so you learn it the hard way, but as we were talking beforehand, now that you've sort of been able to fix that up, the P&L's juicy, you said you're back in buying season. What is Matt Srama looking at 2025? Business is going, is growing. You've obviously started to accumulate some of those bigger assets. Mate, are you going to be popping up a tower on the Goldie like Fisher, or like what is someone like you now looking at in terms of size? Is it commercial or where you think you're at?
Yeah. I think the next stage of the portfolio, it's good. It's like sometimes you plant seeds and then the fruit's there and then you don't eat it straight away, and you feel like sometimes that was a missed opportunity. So what I mean is I missed the opportunity to pull out a stack of equity probably a year and a half ago because I made that mistake of the business, but it didn't go anywhere, right? yes, I was time out of the market, but I've got to be patient with myself too. This is all learning. It's just growing. That's a good thing around property. It just keeps growing if you're buying right. So now the pie's even juicier now. I pull it out and now I can make, I guess, decisions in unison. So what I'm thinking now is, yes, I like commercial. I really want to do a bit more in commercial. A strategy that my brokers opened me up to is like the commercial with the uniblock. I still love uniblocks, but the way they're valued is very interesting in terms of versus residential. So obviously commercials are based off leases. So some of those uniblocks I got, they're all pretty old and dingy kind of thing. So my uplift with unit blocks, I really want to cosmetically uplift them, release, and the leases obviously project the valuations
for value
on the property. So I see that as a really cool strategy. It's one that, again, like you said it earlier, man, I agree with that. There's so many ways to skin a cat, right? There's so many, but that one really interests me and I love it. And I love uniblocks. So I really want to go down the track of finding some of these unit blocks. Like I'm in the market at the moment and looking at a few where they're very well under rented. I can get in there. You know, it's on a good land holding.
In Queensland, Gold Coast, Brizzy?
No, well,
you
I'm
got to
looking a bit
diversify.
yeah. I'm looking in Victoria.
Okay.
Victoria's a spot I'm looking pretty hard in. Still parts of southeast Queensland for sure. Obviously, I've got a bit of an unfair advantage on the Gold Coast because I do get things across the lap that are kind of juicy off markets and things hard, like
right?
that. Yeah. So, but if there's a potential where, you know, there's an opportunity to up the leases, if I feel it's under rented, good locations, the vacancy rates are low, you can up, you know, cosmetic little touch up, go back to the bank.
Yep.
It's nearly higher deposits, higher input, but it's nearly a quicker way, could potentially keep rolling into more. So that's something I got an eye on. And then also, but never underestimate just your set and forgets though. I think there's always a place for good set and forgets because that I will get to a place of selling down certain things to pay off others. Like I don't.
That's the goal. That's the end goal.
Yeah, 100%. I don't want to have 100 properties or, you know, just for the sake of having 100. I really want to strategically start thinking around like what is my needs and wants. Like currently where I am, I have no kids yet, but like I want to take kids into account and what does that look like and how many holidays I want to go in a year. And, you know, it's something I'm doing at the moment. It's just figuring out what that perfect life is from a income perspective and then really just trying to reverse engineer it in a way. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, uniblocks that have got under rent opportunity where you can boost the rent, some set and forgets. Again, I'm okay with a bit of negative cash flow at the moment for stuff like that, and definitely commercial. I think around that, like low to mid ones to 2.5, 3 mil, that zone I'm finding. I don't know.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I think if you can get up above a little bit above one, because that's obviously where a lot of the entry guys are coming in now, like units like what we're in now, 800 to 900. I feel like there's a lot of competition, but sort of the closer you get to 2, 3,
less competition.
You put 35% on that. Not everyone's got 800 grand to go into those sorts of deals. So
and then that's the lesson too. Is like when you have like opportunity, like yes, bigger deposits, but I've got an opportunity now where I've got some equity there now where I can make some of these plays where. Like if it's on the table, like have a crack. And one early mentor always said, if there's a deal, there's a deal at the end of the day. Like people always ask, what's the best location? What's the best strategy? Like, again, if something's worth X and you feel you're getting it for X and there's ability to push it up in value, you know what I mean? Like, you'll have a look at it. You'll have a good look at it.
Always have a look at it. Always have a deal. Always looking. Always looking.
Always have a look.
All right. Well, look, Matty, the way we finish up these podcasts is I usually ask for one piece of advice you can give to everyone out there, listeners, and then a quote you live your life by.
Oof. All right. What was it? One
bit of advice for everyone listening.
Yeah. I think the word success is always one I'm always interested in. Like, the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing that everyone's definition of success is upon them. Like, don't ever feel as though you need to be someone else or inauthentically act a certain way because you deem success as someone you see, or, you know, what do you want? Like, what is important to you? At the end of the day, success, I believe, is that feeling of content, and you're comfortable in your own skin. And if you see people, you know, and you want that external validation, I think just rely on successes within. Everyone's version of success is different, and let everyone play their own race. I think that's always stuck with me. Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah.
And what's a quote Matt Srama lives his life by?
Matt,
I know you're a journaling guy. Yeah, I know you're a meditation guy.
I'm just trying to think, which one should I pull out? No.
Give me 4 or 5, man. I'll chop them up.
Chop them up.
Yeah, go on. Give me your best.
I'll try and give a few random ones that, mate, just literally pop to mind. Obviously, you either win or you learn is obviously a big one. This one, I don't know why it's just popped in my head, but I remember hearing it. I was like, oh, it's you don't have relationship problems, you have inner child patterns yet to be resolved. I was like,
okay.
Yeah. Completely left field. Yeah. So just on that one. And then probably with business and where we are, this one's just relevant for the journey I'm on the business. Build the people will build the business. So that's really relatable to me. Is like I've realized in business that it's a team sport. It's brought me back to my sporting days again. And, you know, if I can help my people within the business grow, achieve their goals, their property goals and their financial goals, effectively everyone wins at the end of the day. So, yeah, build the people will build the business.
That's a quality one to end on, man. Well, look, Matty Srama, appreciate you coming on the Everything Property podcast. It's amazing to hear what you've done, even outside of your rugby league career, what you're building, deals you're putting together, seeing your success in business and in property. It's inspiring, and I'm sure that everyone that's listening at home has also been pumped up, ready to run through a wall or a front row.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks so much.
Oh, legend, man. Thanks for having me.
Cool.